We found him a better home, my parents said coldly after secretly selling my dog. I packed everything that night. 7 years later, they wanted to meet my daughter. I was 19 when I adopted Max, a golden retriever mix with sad eyes and ribs that showed through his dull coat. I still remember that day at the shelter, how he pressed against the chain link fence, not barking like the others, just watching, hopping. His previous owners had dumped him after moving to a no-pets apartment complex. Their loss became my salvation. Back then, I was stumbling through my first year of community college, working nights at a 24-hour diner, and living in a shoebox apartment that smelled perpetually of the Chinese restaurant below. My parents had made it crystal clear they wouldn't be funding my reckless decision to skip a 4-year university. Independence was my middle finger to their controlling ways, even if it meant living on ramen and tips. Getting Max wasn't planned. I couldn't afford a dog. My landlord only allowed pets with an extra deposit I definitely couldn't spare. But when those brown eyes locked with mine at the shelter, something shifted inside me. I emptied my meager savings account, worked double shifts for weeks, and convinced my landlord to let me pay the pet deposit in installments. My parents were livid. "A dog? You can barely take care of yourself," my mother had spat over the phone. My father's voice had that familiar, disappointed tone. "This is exactly why we wanted you to live at home," one impulsive decision after another. But Max wasn't impulsive. He was necessary. He was the first thing that felt truly mine. Those first months we grew together. I taught him to sit, stay, shake. He taught me patience, routine, responsibility. When I'd come home exhausted from double shifts, his excitement made the fatigue worth it. On nights when the walls of my apartment seemed to close in, his warm body curled against mine kept the darkness at bay. He slept on my bed, ate whatever I could afford, and never once complained when dinner was late or walks were shortened because of my work schedule. Max gained weight. His coat grew shiny. The shelter dog with fearful eyes transformed into a confident, gentle companion who charmed everyone at the dog park. Even my crusty old landlord would slip him treats when I paid rent. Then Aunt Sarah got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, Mom's only sister, living 3 states away with no one else to help. Despite our strained relationship, family was family. When Mom called asking if I could fly out to help for 2 weeks while she arranged hospice care, I didn't hesitate. But Max was the complication. My friends lived in dorms. The boarding kennels wanted more per night than I made in 3 hours of waitressing. In desperation, I called my parents. "Just for 2 weeks," I begged. "I've written down all his routines, his food, his medicine for his ear infection. Please, I don't have anyone else to ask." Their reluctance was palpable, but they agreed. Dad picked us up, eyeing Max warily as he settled in the backseat, sensing my anxiety. I kissed his head goodbye, promised I'd be back soon, and boarded a plane with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Those 2 weeks stretched into 3 as Aunt Sarah's condition worsened. I called daily, asking about Max. The updates grew increasingly vague. "He's fine, eating well, no trouble." The evasiveness made my skin crawl, but what could I do? I was states away, watching my aunt fade while my mother crumbled under the strain. Then came the call that Aunt Sarah had passed. Another week for the funeral and settling affairs. By then, the knot in my stomach had transformed into full-blown panic. Dad's texts about Max had stopped entirely. I landed back home with my chest tight with anticipation. All I wanted was to bury my face in Max's fur, to feel his heartbeat against mine while I processed my grief. Dad picked me up at the airport, unusually quiet. No mention of Max, no anecdotes about his antics, nothing. When we pulled into their driveway, Mom was waiting on the porch, no golden shadow bouncing at her side. "Where's Max?" my voice cracked. The silence felt like a physical blow. "We found him a better home," Dad finally said, not meeting my eyes. "A family with kids and a yard. He needed more than you could give him." I couldn't process the words, couldn't breathe. "You sold my dog." "Rehomed," Mom corrected, as if the semantics mattered. "He was destructive, chewed furniture, barked constantly. The neighbors complained." Lies, all lies. Max wasn't destructive. He was trained. He was good. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice barely recognizable. "Who has him?" "It's done," Dad snapped. "You're too young for this responsibility. We did you a favor." A favor. They called stealing and selling my dog, my family, a favor. I don't remember much of what followed. There was screaming, crying, accusations. I tore through their house looking for any sign of Max, any clue to where he might be. In Dad's home office I found it, a receipt tucked into his desk drawer, $300 and a name, Daniel Mercer, an address in the suburbs. I took it and walked out, ignoring their calls to be reasonable, to understand they'd acted in my best interest. Nothing they said mattered anymore. They weren't parents, they were thieves. The Mercers lived in one of those cookie-cutter developments with perfect lawns and matching mailboxes. A neighborhood I could never afford. I knocked, heart pounding, rehearsing what to say, what to do if they refused. A woman answered, puzzled at first, then horrified as I explained who I was, why I was there. Her husband joined her, equally uncomfortable as the story unfolded. "We had no idea," he said quietly. "Your parents said they were moving to a condo that didn't allow pets. They never mentioned." "Can I see him?" My voice broke. "Please, I just need to see him." They exchanged looks, then nodded. Mrs. Mercer called softly, "Apollo, come here, boy." Apollo. They'd even changed his name. But when he bounded around the corner, nothing else mattered. Max, my Max, stopped dead in his tracks. For one terrible moment, I feared he wouldn't recognize me. Then his entire body began to quiver, a whine building in his throat before erupting into joyful barking as he launched himself at me. I collapsed to my knees, burying my face in his fur as he frantically licked my face, his entire body wiggling with happiness. He remembered. He knew me. To their credit, the Mercers were decent people. When Mrs. Mercer's eyes filled with tears watching our reunion, I knew they'd grown to love him too. Their kids would be devastated. They'd paid honest money. But they also had humanity my parents lacked. They understood that some bonds can't be broken by convenience or cash. "Take him," Mr. Mercer said finally. "He's yours, always was." I tried to return their money. They refused. Instead, they helped me load Max's new bed and toys into my beat-up Honda, extracting only a promise that their kids could visit him sometimes. I agreed through tears of gratitude. That night, I packed everything I owned from my parents' house while Max watched, never letting me out of his sight. My father tried reasoning, then yelling, then bargaining. My mother cried, accused me of being ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. "You had no right," I told them, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "He wasn't yours to give away." I didn't go back to my apartment, couldn't risk them knowing where to find us. Instead, I couch-surfed with friends until I found a pet-friendly room to rent across town. I worked doubles, triples, picked up odd jobs on my days off. Max ate before I did, always. Some nights, dinner was whatever the diner would let me take home at the end of my shift, or nothing at all, but we were together. The financial struggle was brutal. Pet deposits, vet bills for Max's ear infection that had worsened while I was gone, juggling work and classes. But every hardship was worth it when I'd wake to find him curled against me, his warmth a shield against the world. My parents tried reaching out. Calls, texts, cards with checks I tore up without cashing. Their apologies rang hollow, always circling back to how they'd been trying to help, how I was too young, too impulsive, too emotional. Never acknowledging the fundamental violation of trust, the casual cruelty of taking away the one being who loved me unconditionally. I blocked their numbers, changed my email, moved again when I could afford it. Life went on. Years passed. I graduated, found a job at a marketing firm, met Ryan at a dog park when Max, graying around the muzzle but still playful, decided Ryan's husky Luna was his new best friend. Ryan understood about Max, about the invisible tether between us. He'd rescued Luna from a neglectful situation. He got it. When we moved in together, Max claimed his spot on our bed without hesitation. When we married 2 years later, he wore a bow tie and carried our rings down the aisle. And when our daughter Lily was born, he appointed himself her guardian, sleeping beside her crib, gently nudging us awake when she cried before we even heard the monitor. I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost 7 years when the Facebook message arrived. Mom had found me through a mutual friend, discovered she had a granddaughter she'd never met. The message oozed with manipulative nostalgia, how much they missed me, how they'd changed, how families should stick together. Not one word about Max. Ryan found me staring at the screen, hands shaking. "You don't owe them anything," he said quietly, "but whatever you decide, I'm with you." Lily was 8 months old. Max was 10, slowing down, his muzzle fully silver. The past felt simultaneously distant and raw, like a wound scabbed over but still tender to the touch. I agreed to meet them once in a public place without Lily. Ryan came with me, a silent support as we waited at the coffee shop. Max stayed home, blissfully unaware that the people who had discarded him were about to re-enter our orbit. They looked older. Dad's hair had thinned, Mom's had grayed. They hugged me awkwardly, tried to hug Ryan, who stepped back with a polite nod instead. We ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather, my job, their retirement plans, danced around the 7-year gap like it was a minor scheduling conflict rather than a deliberate excision. Then Mom pulled out her phone, showing pictures of her friends' grandchildren. "We've missed so much of Lily's life already," she sighed, voice thick with manufactured emotion. "When can we meet her?" "That depends," I said evenly, "on whether you can acknowledge what you did." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "That was so long ago, we made a mistake, we're sorry, can't we move forward?" "A mistake?" The word tasted bitter. "You sold my dog while I was helping take care of your dying sister. You lied about it. You never once in 7 years actually apologized without making excuses." "We thought," Mom began, but I cut her off. "If you can't even say it, how can I trust you with my daughter?" Silence stretched between us, heavy with unsaid words. Finally, Dad leaned forward, his face flushed. "Fine, we sold your dog. We did it because we were angry you moved out, angry you were making it on your own without our help. We wanted to teach you a lesson about responsibility, about consequences. It wasn't about the dog being destructive, it was about showing you that we still had control." The admission hit like a slap, even though I'd always suspected it. 7 years of distance, and they still couldn't see how twisted their logic had been. "His name is Max," I said quietly. "He's 10 now, he sleeps at the foot of Lily's crib every night. He's the reason I met my husband. He's the reason I learned what real love looks like, the kind without conditions or control, and you almost took that from me." Mom was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Dad stared at his coffee cup like it held answers. "I'll send you photos of Lily," I continued. "Once a month, if that goes well, maybe we can schedule a video call in a few months, but you don't get to pretend the past didn't happen. You don't get to play loving grandparents without earning back my trust." They agreed, desperate for any connection. I didn't tell them that Max was slowing down, that the vet had found a mass during his last checkup, some truths they hadn't earned the right to share. The photos turned to video calls, the video calls to brief, supervised visits. Each time they brought gifts for Lily, tried to buy her affection the way they'd once tried to buy mine. Each time I reminded them of our boundaries. Ryan watched them like a hawk, never fully warming to the people who had caused so much pain. Then came the day Max couldn't get up from his bed. His back legs, once strong enough to leap into my arms, now trembled with the effort of standing. The vet confirmed what we already knew: the cancer had spread. There were treatments that might buy time, but they would only postpone the inevitable while possibly causing suffering. We brought him home for one last perfect day. Burgers from his favorite drive-thru, a slow walk to the park where he'd first met Luna, hours of gentle pets and whispered gratitude for all he'd given us. Lily, not quite 2, sensed something was different, patting his head with unusual gentleness, sharing her favorite stuffed animal. That evening, the vet came to our home. Max went peacefully, his head in my lap, Ryan's hand on his flank, surrounded by love and dignity, the exact opposite of how my parents had discarded him years before. I couldn't bring myself to post about his passing on social media, couldn't bear the platitudes from people who didn't understand what he'd meant to me. But I needed my parents to know, needed them to face what they'd done, what they'd nearly stolen from me. I invited them over, something I'd never done before. They arrived excited, bearing gifts for Lily, expecting another step toward reconciliation. Instead, they found our home somber, photos of Max displayed on every surface, his collar resting on the mantel. "Max passed away yesterday," I said without preamble. "I thought you should know." The color drained from Mom's face. Dad stood frozen, the gift bag dangling forgotten from his fingers. "I'm so sorry," Mom whispered, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, feeling nothing. "Do you know what keeps going through my head?" I asked quietly. "That you almost took away 10 years with him, 10 years of love, of growth, of family. You almost made it so I never saw him grow old, never got to say goodbye, never got to hold him at the end." Dad sank heavily onto our couch. Jenny, no, I need you to hear this. You didn't just sell my dog, you tried to sell my family, my heart, and now I need you to look at these pictures and see exactly what you almost stole from me. I showed them Max as best man at our wedding, Max gently licking newborn Lily's feet, Max teaching Luna to play fetch, Max sleeping beside me through college all-nighters, Max's gray muzzle resting on my pregnant belly, a life, a history, a love story they'd tried to end for spite. We didn't understand, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. He was just a dog to us, and that's why I'll never fully trust you, I replied, because anyone who can say just a dog is someone who doesn't understand love without conditions. We sat in silence after that, the weight of everything said and unsaid filling the room. Eventually, Lily toddled in, breaking the tension as only a child can. I let my parents stay for dinner. Let them play with their granddaughter, but something fundamental had shifted. In acknowledging Max's death, they finally had to face the reality of what they'd done, not just to a dog but to me, to trust, to family. We maintain contact now, limited visits, holidays, brief calls. They've learned not to push boundaries, learned that access to my life and my daughter is a privilege they nearly lost permanently, not a right they're entitled to. They send birthday cards to Lily and remember the anniversary of Max's passing with respectful texts. It's not forgiveness exactly, but it's recognition, acknowledgement. And in the end, that's all I really wanted, for them to see the enormity of what they'd done and to live with that knowledge the way I'd had to live with the almost loss of it. Last year we adopted another rescue, a scruffy terrier mix Lily named Captain. He sleeps where Max once slept, loves as Max once loved. Different but the same in all the ways that matter. When my parents visit, they're careful with him, respectful of his place in our home. They've learned finally that family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's fur and paws and unconditional love. And sometimes it's making people face their worst actions not for revenge but for truth. Because without truth there can be no real healing, without accountability there can be no genuine connection. Max taught me that, and for that lesson alone I'll be forever grateful that I found him that day at the shelter, and even more grateful that I found him again when the world tried to tear us apart.